Hello everybody, thank you so much for joining me. If you enjoyed today's video, please do leave it a like and subscribe if you want to help support me and my channel. If you want to further support me, I have a Patreon, link is in the description. With that you can get extra content, as well as that there's a PayPal link as well. So, the Avengers Infinity War. What a surprise, what a wonderful surprise this movie was. Now, I've never been the biggest fan of Marvel superhero movies. I thoroughly enjoy the Guardians of the Galaxy movies. I really enjoyed Captain America, the Winter Soldier. I think the Russo brothers do a fantastic job of close quarters combat. I watched Spiderman Homecoming literally last night. That was also a very welcoming surprise, a very refreshing movie for the typical Marvel deal. I think Marvel films share problems. All of them share similar problems, and the Avengers Infinity War still has some of these problems, but the way it was done has also gotten rid of a lot of these problems. Now, the Avengers Infinity War isn't exactly a movie. It's not really a movie. As Ralph the Movie Maker says, it's more of an event, and I completely understand what he's saying when he says that. If you haven't seen any of the Marvel superhero movies before this one, you will be lost and you will be confused as to what is happening. Now, we're going to be getting into spoiler territory today, but I will try and be as careful as possible. If there is going to be a big spoiler that I'll talk about, I will let you know before that happens. So, let me get my wonderful notepad out. Also, I know this content is different and new to the channel, so please do let me know down in the comments if you enjoyed today's video, and if you'd like to see more stuff like this. I'm going to be doing more stuff like this because I love movies, I really do, and I love talking about movies. The next review is going to be on 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri, which, wow, that film is just, wow, really incredible. Anyway, let me first discuss what I didn't like, because that won't take too long, actually. First is the music. Now, I think nearly every Marvel superhero film shares this problem. The music is very bland, very just simple. I like the Avengers theme, but it's very typical standard action music, and I think that let the film down, because the film has a much darker tone to most Marvel films, and I think if it had an appropriate soundtrack, something similar to perhaps the Dark Knight soundtrack, I think that would have really enhanced the feel of the movie. The biggest problem, which is similar to what I was just talking about, is what a lot of the Marvel superhero movies share, and that is the lack of personality and the lack of style. This really lets the film down. It's such a shame. If there was more of a personality, something to make it, and the Avengers Infinity War really stands out from the rest of the Marvel superhero movies, and that's really what I'm going to be talking about today. But it does lack personality, it really does, and that is a shame. That does let it down. It just, at moments, it's just, you know, a standard CGI filled big budget superhero movie. Now, not to be jumping on Christopher Nolan's, but I love the Dark Knight trilogy. I love it to pieces. I love the Dark Knight Rises. I don't really understand why a lot of people have problems with that. I think that film has a huge scale to it, much like the Avengers Infinity War. Some of the action sequences were pretty boring, pretty standard. Some of the stuff with Wakanda and the alien monsters, I think that was pretty standard. Saying that though, I really enjoyed the action with Doctor Strange. I think the way he manipulates reality is really interesting and really adds to what's going on. I also loved the messing around with reality from Thanos, where he would turn like a gun into some flowers or something like that, or the gun that shoots bubbles, I think. And the way he turns people into like weird fourth dimensional shapes, it's so fascinating, because I love quantum physics. As you may have guessed by my name, physics, I do love physics, especially quantum physics. I find it so fascinating. So I do have a real big interest in the fourth dimension and hypercubes and tesseracts. So I loved that element. I love the bending of reality. That stuff is always very exciting for me, and that's one of the reasons why this film stood out so much for me. The Vision and Scarlet Witch's relationship, I think, was a little bit forced, a little bit too goddamn cheesy. That's another typical Marvel problem, is the cheesy factor. Again, that's why I like the Dark Knight trilogy, because there isn't really that cheesy element to it. And I know that's a whole different thing, it's a lot darker, whereas Marvel is usually more playful and more light. However, this is probably the darkest Marvel film I've ever seen. You have Thor going to meet Peter Dinklage and his character to craft the weapon to kill Thanos. I don't think Peter Dinklage, he wasn't really used much, but I don't think he did the greatest job. And I love Tyrion Lannister. I love his portrayal of that character in Game of Thrones. I think he did a wonderful job of that, but I think he just wasn't too great in this film. I will also say some of the dialogue was a little bit lacking. Some of Tony Stark's comments weren't as funny as they often are, so that was a bit of a shame. So those are most of the problems I have with the movie. As we're talking about the rest of the film, I might mention other issues I have if I remember them. There are several themes to this movie. Firstly, this isn't really an Avengers movie. This is really Thanos' movie. He is definitely the main character, and that was one thing I was very worried about. The huge amount of characters. I was very concerned that it was just going to be a complete mess, loads of plot problems and that kind of thing, but I think they really pulled it off. I actually do think they really pulled it off, and I think what helped that was having Thanos as this wonderfully fleshed out character. Because you're going into this film and there's no character development, because you already know all the characters and they have already been developed. So that is another thing that makes it so interesting. And yeah, this isn't high art, but a lot of people have to understand the ambition, and it's not easy pulling off what they have pulled off. Just look at the Justice League as an example of how you can really screw up this kind of a thing. I think they've really pulled it off. All the characters are wonderfully fleshed out. So the only character development you really see in this film is from Thanos and Thor, actually. Yeah, I've never been madly keen on Thor as a character. However, I think he actually has a really interesting character in the Avengers Infinity War, because, spoiler territory here in 3, 2, 1, at this point Thor has lost everything. Loki is killed right at the start of the movie. There's a lot of death in this, but we'll get on to that. So Thor is now this tragic character with a lot of sadness behind him, and I think that is a good bit of depth that Thor has needed. So as I said, death is a big part of this film. There is a lot of death, and the real theme of it is failure, and I think that is one of the reasons why this film stands out and why I enjoyed it so much. Similar to The Last Jedi, which is also about failure. They fail over and over and over, and it's similar in this film, because, spoiler territory in 3, 2, 1, at the end of the day, Thanos wins. He wins everything. At the end of the movie, he has got his way. No one has managed to defeat him, and thus half the characters die. We lose Star-Lord, Spiderman right at the end. That was absolutely heartbreaking, seeing him terrified of dying. Gamora's death was very sad for me, because I really like Gamora as a character, and I know some people don't, but I think she is a wonderful character. And I think she is the type of character that should be inspiring for women, as opposed to someone like Wonder Woman, which is a very thin character. I think Gamora has a lot of layers to her, which is why I was so sad to see her death. As I said before, Guardians of the Galaxy 1 and 2, I love those films. I absolutely love them because they stand out as well. They're very different and unique, and that's why I enjoyed them so much, and that's why I enjoyed this film so much. So Gamora died, nearly everyone died, and Thanos gets to sit down and watch the sunset at the end of the film. Vision dies as well, and I think there's going to be another Avengers film next year, and I think we all can jolly well know that most of these characters are going to be coming back. I don't know if Gamora will come back. I don't think Vision will come back. And I don't think Loki will come back. But of course there's the time stone, so they can just reverse time. And I don't like that that's probably what's going to happen. I think it would have been far more interesting if it was left as that, half the characters dying. And now we'll move on to one of the other huge reasons why I love this film and why it stands out so much, and that's because there is real threat. There is real consequences to what happens here, as you can see at the end by what I said a moment ago. There is real consequence here. Comparing it to Age of Ultron, for example, that film didn't feel like there was any consequences because you're battling robots, you're fighting Ultron. We know that the heroes are going to win at the end of the day, of course they are. But with Thanos, he's so incredibly powerful and he is just destroying everything in his path. So that gave it huge amounts of suspense. And going into another spoiler here in 3, 2, 1, with Vision, he dies, and you think that he's going to be saved. You think they'll be able to pull the crystal out and save his life, but no, it just rips it straight out of his head. So there is real consequence to the actions of this movie. I think that's a big game changer for Marvel superhero films. It's something different and something we haven't really seen much of before. So yeah, it's very uniquely structured. It's not really like any film I've ever seen, to be honest. There is such a huge story going on here with so many different sides to it, so many different subplots and other characters. It's been years and years in the making, and I think that's a really crucial thing to give accolades for. So the visual effects. I think the visual effects were really impressive. This film cost what? Let's take a look. So on Wikipedia it says the budget was $316 to $400 million. My god, oh my god. And you can bloody well tell, you really can. I think the visual effects are fantastic, and that's another thing that you have to respect, because again, looking at a film like Justice League with the most incredibly poor and useless visual effects, you have to give respect to Infinity War for looking the way it did. Now I know that like so much of the film is CGI, and I have always been opposed to that. I really have. I really do like the effects in The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi. I think they're pretty fantastic. I think you really should use practical effects whenever you can. There are some effects that didn't look good, mainly Bruce Banner in the Hulkbuster. I think he looked ridiculous. It really reminds me of the Rhino in The Amazing Spider-Man 2. The way he looked inside the Rhino suit, he looked terrible, and that's unfortunately the same for Bruce Banner. So another thing that's really important, I think, is having a villain with a understandable motivation. I think Thanos is one of Marvel's most fleshed out characters. I think the Russo brothers have really wanted to make us understand Thanos and understand his motivation. I mean, you can understand his motivation, and to an extent you can agree with it, whilst knowing that it's obviously not the right thing to do and he's a clearly evil and destructive person. You can still understand the reason why he wants to do what he does. So other villains I really enjoy would be the ones from the Dark Knight trilogy, so Bane, Ra's al Ghul, you've got Joker. I love those villains, and I think each of them has an understandable motivation. You then have the Sam Raimi Spider-Man films. I absolutely loved Dr. Octopus, and I enjoyed the Green Goblin as well. From Marvel, you have Vulture from Spider-Man Homecoming, played by Michael Keaton. I think he did a great job of portraying that character, and again, a very understandable motivation. You also have Loki. I think he's a really funny villain and did a great job. And now if we take a look at some terrible villains, right at the top there we have Electro from The Amazing Spider-Man 2. What an awful, stupid villain that was. He had absolutely no reason for turning evil. It made no goddamn sense. Then you have the Lizard from The Amazing Spider-Man 1. You have Steppenwolf. He's a pretty crappy, standard, boring, evil villain. And that's another thing that Marvel superhero films share as well. You can often have just unnecessarily evil villains that want to, you know, shoot a laser into the sky or destroy everything. I think Thanos is a great one and is going right up there as one of my all-time favourites. I do believe that the Avengers Infinity War is the best superhero film since Logan. My favourite superhero films are The Dark Knight, The Dark Knight Rises, and Logan. They are my 3 favourites, and I think this is going up there as maybe my 4th favourite. So these have been my reasons as to why the Avengers Infinity War is a game changer and one of the best Marvel superhero films to date. Let me know down in the comments what you think about this, whether you enjoy the film, whether you don't enjoy the film, and if you enjoyed the video today, please do leave it a like and subscribe if you want to help support me and my content. Again, if you want to see more stuff like this, let me know down in those comments. Also, I have a Patreon set up if anyone wants to support me more, gain new content, etc, etc. Thank you so much, guys. I will see you in the next one. Take care now.